Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about hatred towards Asians. Stop Asian Hate. It's a slogan that came about a couple of years ago as a result of the pandemic. But I'm going to demonstrate that Harvard University, the most prestigious college in the world, is actually the home of Asian hate. They absolutely hate Asians, and we'll be getting into all that. But first of all, the slogan, Stop Asian Hate. It's a slogan in the name of a series of demonstrations, protests, and rallies against violence targeting Asians and Asian Americans that were held across the US in 2021 in response to racial discrimination against Asian Americans relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19, otherwise known as the Chinese virus, it originated in Wuhan, China, and because of that, allegedly there were people attacking Asians because of it, and they were taking their anger out on Chinese people and Koreans, Japanese, people from East Asia, and obviously I utterly condemn such attacks, absolutely disgusting and disgraceful. But I'm going to show you how this hate spawns from university, from the top levels of education in the United States. So Harvard University is a private league research university in Cambridge, Massachusetts, founded in 1636 as Harvard College and named for its first benefactor, the Puritan clergyman John Harvard. It is the oldest institution of higher learning in the United States and among the most prestigious in the world. And this is the home of Asian hate. This is where all the Asian hate began. So let's get into what's going on at Harvard. So this article here from the New York Post, a chance for the Supremes to end Harvard's ugly discrimination against Asians. Now this was written by Kinney Shu. Now I'm going to be looking at another article he wrote later on. So this is all about a Supreme Court case. Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, now at the Supreme Court, has the potential to reshape the course of affirmative action in the United States for the better. So the case positions a group of highly qualified Asian American college applicants against the university to which they seek admission, Harvard. These applicants allege that Harvard has practiced long-standing admissions discrimination against them in favor of less qualified minorities. So they're saying that Harvard is choosing blacks and Latinos over Asians. It's been argued that Asian Americans have to score as much as 450 points higher on the SAT to have a similar chance of admission as black students. So this was done by a Duke economics professor, Peter Arcidiacono, and he found that black students in the fourth lowest academic decile had a higher chance of admission than an Asian in the top decile. So you have black students scoring way lower in SAT tests getting into Harvard, and Asian Americans who ace the SAT not getting in. Harvard disproportionately scores Asian Americans the lowest on personality to justify this discrimination. So this is where we get into Harvard's discrimination. They have this test of personality, and it's completely subjective and arbitrary, and they give Asians really low scores to balance out their high scores academically. And this is why a lot of Asians don't get admitted to Harvard, even though they do very well academically. Harvard has also given up on the SAT requirement. So they've had enough of SATs because Asian students are doing so well in SATs, they just can't handle the fact that they have to take that into account in order to admit more Asians than they want to. They really don't want to admit Asians into Harvard. Harvard claims its use of race lets it admit more applicants from traditionally disadvantaged communities. Yet this is only true if the only form of disadvantage you care about is the shade of your skin. Most black students admitted to Harvard, 71%, are upper middle class or higher. So he's saying that the black students who go to Harvard, these are not like blacks living in poor ghettos in big cities in America. These are already well-to-do blacks, upper middle class or higher. So you're talking the sons and daughters of black doctors and so on. Why the Asian American students lost their case against Harvard, but should have won. So this is written by Evan Gerstmann, who is a professor, and he publishes on constitutional and educational issues. So on Tuesday, a federal judge ruled against a group of Asian American students who claimed that Harvard discriminated against them in their admissions policy. So this was written in October of 2019. So this was a few years ago. There is no question that Asian American students face a disadvantage in gaining admission to Harvard. The question is why, and whether Harvard is responsible for it. So he's saying there's absolutely no doubt about it. Asian Americans are disadvantaged. The reason that it's harder for Asian Americans to get into Harvard is that their personal ratings, a subjective evaluation of personal qualities, are on average significantly lower than for white applicants. So the federal judge, Alison D. Burroughs, now she's the one who made the decision, So this judge has decided that it's okay for Harvard to discriminate against Asians. Simple as that. Now, she argued that this personal ratings is, she's trying to say that it is objective and that they're actually giving objective opinions that Asians don't have personalities. This is what she said. The court therefore concludes that the data demonstrates a statistically significant and negative relationship between Asian American identity and the personal rating assigned by Harvard admission officers, holding constant any reasonable set of observable characteristics. So she's admitting that these admission officers see Asians as having no personality. So the judge also said that the plaintiffs could not prove that the lower personal ratings are a result of animus or ill-motivated racial hostility towards Asians. So what she's basically saying is that she agrees that Asians have poor personalities, that Asians are dull, boring, bland people. This is what she's saying. Alison D. Burroughs. She's saying that Asians don't have personalities. And so the question is, why do Asians score poorly? And the judge said, it is possible that the self-selected group of Asian Americans that applied to Harvard during the years included in the dataset used in this case did not possess the personal qualities that Harvard is looking for at the same rate as white applicants. So her point is that she's trying to say that these particular Asian Americans who apply to Harvard just have the personalities that Harvard are not looking for. So she's basically saying, almost in a direct way, that Asian Americans who apply to Harvard are dull people with no personalities. Gertzman says it is disappointing that a federal judge would indulge in that sort of conjecture. I mean, I totally agree with that. The federal judge is essentially saying that these Asians are just boring and dull people. Unbelievable. I mean, this is just such disgusting racism. And here is the court's second explanation for the racial personal rating gap, is that there is racial bias in the evaluations by teachers and counselors. So teacher and guidance counselor recommendations seemingly presented Asian Americans as having less favorable personal characteristics than similarly situated non-Asian American applicants. So she's putting the blame on the teachers and guidance counselor that they give like recommendations. They're like the referees when people apply to Harvard. The students get recommendations from teachers in their high school and so on, and the guidance counselors. And she's trying to say that it's the teachers and guidance counselors in high school that are the racists, not Harvard. So she's like trying to totally let Harvard off the hook and blame the high schools for this, the teachers in the high schools. Unbelievable. Harvard's admissions officers are not responsible for any race-related or race-correlated impact that those letters may have. So these are the reference letters written by the teachers for the Asian students. And she's saying that these letters try to make the Asians out to be dull and boring. So it's the high school's fault, the teachers. And this guy argues that the judge should have ruled the other way, because if Harvard is knowingly using instruments that are racially biased, the counselor and teacher recommendations, and does not compensate for that bias, then Harvard's process is biased. So he's saying that Harvard should know that these teachers are biased, and therefore they should take that into account. And just as a quick aside here, Joe Biden, the Biden administration, urges the Supreme Court to reject Harvard affirmative action case. So Joe Biden, the guy who calls Trump a racist and Republicans racist and the ultra MAGAs and the MAGA kings, he calls them racist, but he wanted the Supreme Court to throw out the case. Biden sided with racist Harvard. And here's another article that talks about the case. Federal judge to Harvard. Racial discrimination is bad, except against whites and Asians. So this is exactly what's going on here. Federal Judge Alison Burroughs ruled this week that Harvard University's affirmative action approach to college admissions does not discriminate against Asian American applicants. And Judge Burroughs sided with Harvard. After a close review of her opinion, I found it problematic in several areas. The writer of this article, Helen Raleigh, she brings up a couple of good points here. So Harvard hired this guy called David Card, and he produced all this data, and so did this guy Peter Arcidiacono for the other side, the Students for Fair Admissions, and they both use very similar data. So there was one difference, and let's see what that difference was. Their disagreement results from what data they included in their analysis. For example, Card on behalf of Harvard used ALDCs. So what are ALDCs? Applicants who are student athletes, legacies, linked to top Harvard donors, or children of faculty members. So these are kids who get into Harvard because their parents are employees of Harvard, or their parents donate tons of money to Harvard, or they're like the student athletes, so they play football or whatever. And this guy, Arcidiacono, he took that data out because he said that data should be irrelevant because these people are getting into Harvard regardless. So you should just use the data from students who don't have these advantages to compare to. Whereas Harvard, they used all this data. So obviously that data helped Harvard, and Burroughs rejected the analysis from the plaintiff. And instead she agreed with the data from Harvard's people. She also acknowledged that Asian American applicants would likely be admitted at a higher rate than applicants of other ethnic backgrounds if admissions decisions were made based solely on academic and extracurricular ratings. So in other words, if it was done just on academic ability and extracurricular ratings, Asian Americans would be admitted at way higher rates. So she's admitting that this personality test that they do is screwing over Asians big time. Burroughs is critical of some of the comments from the Harvard's admissions officers. Examples included comments such as, "He's quiet and of course wants to be a doctor," or "Applicant seems like a reserved, hard-working, aspiring woman scientist doctor," or "The applicant is a classic VN Vietnamese bootstrap case." Unbelievable. I mean, how racist can you get? A classic Vietnamese bootstrap case. Or a classic BC/NC blue-collar, non-college background, Asian American from the inner city. These comments reflected recurring characterizations of Asian American applicants that were broadly consistent with stereotypes. So this is coming from the Harvard admissions officers. So remember we were talking about how they were blaming teachers and counselors in high schools. But these phrases were coming from Harvard's admissions officers. So the Harvard admission officers are using the words and phrases that they're trying to claim that the high school teachers are using. In addition to constantly associating Asian students with adjectives such as bright, hardworking, bland, look at this, bland, and not exciting. Not exciting. Bland and not exciting. The analysis also shows admissions officers are statistically more likely to use standard strong. So what's standard strong? It's used to describe Asian American applicants, which means a strong applicant who is nonetheless unlikely to be admitted because he or she is not sufficiently distinguished within Harvard's exceptional applicant pool. So Harvard has all these words and phrases, kind of like almost like racist dog whistles, to use phrasing from these left-wing woke people, that Harvard are using these buzzwords here as like a dog whistle to say, well, standard strong, sorry, you're not gonna cut it. You're not part of the exceptional applicant pool. These hardworking, quiet Asians who work incredibly hard, and maybe they're not the center of attention, maybe they're not the star of the show. They might be a little quiet and reserved, and this is killing Asian applicants right here. It's crazy. And here's another really good point. Another reasoning in Burroughs' ruling that really bothers me is her proportional representation argument. She states in her opinion that since Asians represent only 6% of the US population, but close to 24% of Harvard's admitted class, Asian Americans are already overrepresented. This argument I see cropping up all the time. The judge is trying to say that there's 4 times more Asian students in Harvard than there is in the general population, that they're overrepresented. Well, they're overrepresented because they work their asses off, and they deserve to be there. It should be higher. It should be higher than 24%, because they're not admitting Asian students who excel academically and in extracurricular activities, but they're admitting blacks and Latinos instead, and maybe even whites. So this argument is just such a poor argument, and you don't hear people complaining about how something like 70% of NBA players are black, and blacks only make up like 13% of the population. So why do people not complain about that? They use this argument here for admissions into college. If Asians are like outperforming other groups by high margins, then that's just how it is, and they should be, admitted into Harvard. But Harvard set up this personality rating to, I guess, game the system, so to speak, and to try and keep the number of Asian people down. And here are the student demographics here on the right hand side. Look at this. Asians make up 21% of undergrads, blacks 9%. Now blacks make up about 13% of the population. So as you can see, blacks are underrepresented, but not by a huge margin. 9% compared to 13% of the general population. Now look at whites. Whites are 37% of undergrads, but whites make up well over 60% of the American population. Like 60, I think it's 65%, maybe even 70%, something like that. Hispanic or Latino, 11%. Now, I'm not sure what the Hispanic population is in the US might be, if I had to guess, I would say maybe 15 to 20%. Probably underrepresented along with blacks, but probably not by that much. Looking at these figures, Asians are way overrepresented and whites are actually way underrepresented. So if anything, Harvard is being racist towards whites. So let's go back to Kinney Shu, and he wrote this article here. Harvard gives Asian Americans low personality ratings to justify discrimination. So this Kinney Shu guy, I really like this guy because he doesn't hold any punches. He's just saying straight out that Harvard is just being racist against Asians. Asian Americans have long accused Harvard of discriminating against them on the basis of race. The Asian student group Students for Fair Admissions filed a lawsuit demanding Harvard turn over documents detailing its selection process. Alumni who interview Asian Americans generally give them extremely high marks for all these categories. Asian Americans also generally have excellent leadership standing among key extracurriculars. So Asians are getting involved in extracurricular activity and so on, but this really bizarre personality test is really something. The evidence points to race and the ugly stereotypes that are ingrained within them. Asian Americans have long endured painful stereotypes as being test-taking robots who have no personality. Harvard admissions officers either intentionally or unintentionally dismiss Asian American achievement as manufactured from these robot exoskeletons. Unbelievable. This is fighting talk by this guy. It very well could be that even though Harvard's admissions officers personally have no bias, they feel the need to discriminate against Asian Americans on behalf of societal bias, the racist idea that an institution could have too many Asians. And like I said here before, nobody has a problem with too many black players in the NBA or too many females in the news media, and yet Harvard can come along and just discriminate against Asians and use this really sketchy personality test to discriminate. And here he brings up a case back in the early 1900s. Harvard systematically discriminated against people of Jewish descent out of fear that they were eating into the historically Protestant image of the university. It got to the point where Harvard put out a blanket quota on Jews, citing subjective things like personality, charisma, and leadership. So they've done this before. They did it to Jews back in the 1900s. Harvard's discrimination against Jews was later reversed, but this new form of discrimination lives on. So they just swapped discrimination of Jews for discrimination against Asians. Harvard denies any actual quota of Asian Americans. They're saying they do that because it would be blatantly unconstitutional. But you know what? I think what they're doing is unconstitutional as it is. I think the court case was wrong. I think the decision was wrong. And they're blatantly discriminating against Asians, but they're getting away with it because they're claiming this personality test is objective when it's not. It's clearly subjective. And they're using these racist stereotypes against Asians. Unbelievable. So there you go, guys. Harvard University is the home of Asian hate. We need to stop this hate. And you know, you have these people trying to blame white supremacy and all this garbage, and we see that Harvard University is the home of Asian hate. Alright guys, give this video a like and spread this video if you want to expose Harvard University for the racists that they are. Be sure to subscribe to the channel as well. I got tons of videos on a whole bunch of subjects. So until next time, see you guys later.